The Haunting of Swains Fancy by Brenda Seabrook. Chapter 1. What a spooky old house, Mrs. Kalman said. I'd sure hate to live in it. Gives me the shivers. She gives a fake shiver that rattles her plastic bangles. Taylor stared down the long driveway at the stone house that loomed behind a pair of huge oak trees. It was 2 stories tall, plus an attic. The dormer windows looked like a pair of stern, forbidding eyes staring out. Dad hadn't said much about the house, except that it was old and needed some fixing up. They'd been working on it since January. Taylor hadn't expected anything this big or this old. When the car stopped, she unloaded her suitcase and the other bags from the trunk, while Miss Callahan made more disapproving remarks. I bet it's murder to heat that place. I'd hate to have their utility bills. They ought to turn it into a museum and move to a nice modern house. Taylor tried to think of a polite way to reply, gave up, and carried her suitcase to the front steps. She let the heavy brass knocker fall on the front door with a loud thump. Miss Callahan worked in the office next to Mom's. Mom had said they were lucky Taylor could ride with her on such short notice, and that Burneytown, West Virginia, was the only way her sister Bertha's. That was on her way to her sister Bertha's, where she was going for the weekend. They don't seem to be home, Miss Callahan said. I'm sure somebody's here, Taylor said. They're expecting me. I'll check around back. The wing on the left side of the house had its own door. Taylor knocked, but no one answered it either. A screened porch ran the width of the back of the house. Its door was latched, and no cars were parked in the open barn beyond. Taylor didn't know what to do. She went back and stood in the shade of the tree beside the car. Miss Callahan looked at her watch. I'm going to be late for the shower, the bangles rattled on her other arm. I'm sure Dad or Sylvania will be back any minute, Taylor said, feeling anxious that no one was home and that she was holding Miss Callahan up. There's no sense in your waiting. Why don't you go on? Miss Callahan looked doubtful. She checked her watch again. Well, I don't know. Taylor had heard more than she had ever wanted to about the baby shower during the 2-hour trip from Washington, D.C. She wished Miss Callahan would leave. You don't want to miss the shower. If Dad and Sylvania aren't back soon, I'll go over to the neighbors, the, Adamses. They're always home. Why didn't you say so? Miss Callahan wasted no time getting in her car. Taylor gave her a reassuring smile, the kind her mother always whipped out when Taylor wasn't sure about things, and waved until Miss Callahan had zipped down the driveway and turned out of sight on the country road. Taylor was happy to be alone, but annoyed at the same time. Dad knew she was coming this afternoon. So did Sylvania. Why weren't they here? Where were Nicole and Peter? What would she do if they didn't come back soon? There weren't any neighbors named Adams. She had made that up with the first name she could think of. There weren't any neighbors at all that she knew about. Taylor hadn't noticed any nearby houses along the way. If nobody came by 4, she would walk into town and call her mother's cell phone. And they would figure out what to do. Mom could always work things out. That was her job. Public relations, solving problems for a new senator from New Mexico. She'd had to leave today and solve one up for him in Santa Fe, and Taylor had to come back to her dad's a week early, right after school was out. That was okay with her, but why wasn't anyone here? She tried the doorknob again. Still locked, she stepped back and looked at the heavy wooden door. Cut into the stone lintel over it were the words Swains Fancy, 1754. What did that mean? At least it was cool. Giant trees shaded the house from the hot June sun. A lawn sloped away on either side, bound by a boxwood hedge, flower beds and trees. The house faced south. On one side, beyond a group of fat Christmas trees, Taylor discovered a small pond with a bridge to a tiny island just big enough for the white-painted wooden summer house with its bell-shaped roof. She walked across the bridge. Minnows basking in its shade darted away, shimmering the still water. She sat on the encircling bench inside the summer house. The big stone house seemed to peer over the trees, watching her. Its windows were divided into a lot of little panes. Taylor counted 12 panes in the dormer windows, 15 in each of the larger ones on the 2 lower floors. She could walk around and count all the windows and figure out how many window panes were in the whole house. It would be something to do, at least. Or she could stay here on the little island. A cloud of gnats found her. Taylor fanned them away and moved into the other side of the summer house. As she sat down, she saw something move in the upper attic window. A face. She bet it was Nicole. It would be just like her to hide up there and keep Taylor locked out. Nicole would think that was funny. Taylor waved, but nobody waved back. And the face disappeared. How had they come home without her seeing them? They knew she was here. Her things were at the front door. Why didn't they look for her? Why were they watching her from the attic? Suddenly, Taylor was furious. Sylvania would have let her know they were home, or Nicole or Peter. They should have. She ran across the bridge to the front of the house. No one was there. No car stood in the driveway. Had they slipped in while she was walking down to the pond? She banged the door knocker and yelled. No one answered. The house seemed to be waiting for something. Or someone. Chapter 2. Don't think like that, Taylor told herself. It's just a house. An old house where lots of people have lived and died. Taylor backed off the porch and checked the attic windows again. Blank. The outer windows were the same. She sat on the front steps and rummaged in her bag for food, but all she found was a flattened M&M's package on the bottom. She shook it out and was rewarded with a yellow one. She let it dissolve on her tongue. Lunch. Miss Callahan had been in a hurry. You can eat at your dad's, she had said when she picked up Taylor at the apartment this morning. Taylor wished Dad and Sylvania hadn't moved up here. Dad had lived in a town in D.C. until their wedding a year ago. Sylvania had lived in one too with her kids. Nicole and Peter, they wanted to get out into the country, he said. So they bought this old house in Burneytown, West Virginia. Dad had moved up here after Christmas to work on the house. And Taylor had hardly seen him since then. Just brief visits in March and April, neither lasting more than 2 hours. 4 hours with her dad since last Christmas. They hadn't spent a single night with him since he had sold his townhouse. The others had all moved up here permanently when school let out last week. Before that, they came up on weekends to help get the house ready. Nicole and Peter got to spend every night with him. It wasn't fair. He was her dad, not theirs. Dad had apologized and said that he would make it up to her in summer. Now it was summer. She was here and he wasn't. Taylor stretched her legs out in front of her. Where was all that peace and quiet Dad had said they wanted so much? They had to move into the country. The silence here was the noisiest Taylor had ever heard. Things buzzing and humming and clacking all around her. She was used to city sounds. Cars, taxis, buses, metro. Country quiet wasn't really quiet. It was eerie. Maybe something had happened. Maybe she should break a window to get in. She jumped as a car turned into the driveway and ran into the parking area to meet it. Doors opened on the small cream-colored station wagon. Sylvania stepped out, cool in a long, slim green dress, her blonde hair tied back with a green scarf. She smiled when she saw Taylor. Nicole got out on the front passenger side, a small version of Sylvania, with a wider mouth that wasn't welcoming, but welcoming with her smile. She wore a floaty old dress, Sylvania's probably, and had a circle of flowers around her head. Taylor felt her own dark hair, damp and droopy with sweat hanging like little wet strings. And Peter jumped out of the back of the car, his arm in a sling. He grinned proudly as he held up the cast. "Look, Taylor, I broke my arm." "Taylor, you're here already." Sylvania gave her cheek a kiss. "I hoped we would get back first." Peter tried to fly out of a tree. "Mom, I did not." Peter was emphatic. "I fell out." Sylvania threw up her hands. "I don't know what you were doing up there." He mumbled something. "I am the queen of the fairies, and he was one of my servant fairies," Nicole said, ignoring Taylor. "I was not," Peter said. "I was Tarzan." "Whatever," Sylvania said. "Here's Taylor to spend the summer with us." "Hey, Taylor," Peter said. "Want to be the first to sign my cast?" "Sure." "Hey, Nicky." "Don't call me that," Nicole said, barely moving her lips. It was obvious that Nicole didn't want her here. Well, Taylor had news for Nicole. She didn't like Nicole any better than Nicole liked her. But they had to try to get along, for at least the next 6 weeks. "Your dad went to Winchester, Taylor. He had expected to be back before now, but the water pump in the car broke, and he had to get it repaired. He should be back soon." Nicole helped Taylor with her things. Sylvania went to the house. Nicole glanced at Taylor's belongings, waited until Sylvania was out of sight, and then without a word brushed past Taylor and went into the house, leaving Peter to help with the bags. He carried one while Taylor struggled with the rest. The house was cool inside and felt like a lot of people had lived there. Taylor couldn't explain it. She could only feel it. It was as if people were doing things in the rooms. People who were no longer here, cooking in the kitchen, waiting in the hall, mending in the parlor, doing all of the things they did a long time ago. If she looked quickly, she might catch a glimpse of them. The central hall was as wide as a room and had furniture in it, chairs and cupboards. The hands on the tall clock showed 1:15. "Where should I put my stuff?" Taylor asked. "Put it anywhere. Put it in the ceiling. Put it on the floor. Put it in your pockets. Put it on the door," Nicole chanted as she drifted up the stairs. Peter giggled. Taylor didn't think it was so funny. How would Nicole feel if Taylor treated her that way at her house? "Sylvania, where should I put my stuff?" "Upstairs, Taylor," Sylvania called from the other room. "You're sharing Nicole's room for now, until we can get a room ready for you. It'll be fun for you and Nicole to be together. I shared with my sister when I was growing up, and we've always been close. I think because of that." Nicole wasn't her sister. She was Taylor's stepsister, one she hardly knew. But Taylor didn't remind Sylvania. Peter was her stepbrother, and she liked him. Peter wasn't anything like his sister. Taylor climbed the stairs, Peter behind her. He was almost as tall as she was and had brown eyes and sandy hair. More important, he liked her, unlike his stuck-up sister. Upstairs, the hall was not quite as wide, but had furniture in it too, an uncomfortable-looking sofa, a table, and some spindly chairs. Nicole's room was at the front of the house, and overlooked the pond on the other side. Her furniture was all antique-looking, a double bed with tall post, a marble-topped dresser. "You can hang stuff here," Nicole said, opening a door to a tall cabinet she called an armoire. Taylor pushed the door open and saw a 3-inch space. "Thanks." Nicole stared at her. "For what?" "For being so generous." Taylor couldn't stop her sarcasm. She didn't have much to hang anyway. She had only brought one dress. This wasn't supposed to be a dress-up summer. "All that wonderful fresh air will be so good for you," Mom had said. "And now you'll really get to know your new step-siblings." Taylor had already knew all she wanted to know about Nicole. A year older at 12, unfriendly and greedy. Always taking the best of everything for herself. The best piece of chicken, the best chair, the biggest piece of cake. Peter was a year younger. His room was across the hall. A smaller bedroom behind Nicole's had been turned into a bath, and next to Peter's was the door to a spare room. Another door led to the attic. Sylvania and Dad's room was in the wing that had been added later to the house and could only be reached by its stairway from the kitchen family room. The spare bedroom was only for show, Nicole said. The furniture is really old. Mom got it at auctions. That's why you can't stay in it. That's why I have to share my room with you. Taylor got the message. She was as welcome as Lyme disease. What about the attic room? What about the attic room? Nicole pulled a green book from the bookcase. Isn't somebody staying up there? No. Steve's gonna turn it into rooms later on. But I saw somebody up there before you came. Nobody was here, Nicole said. Unless you saw a ghost. She giggled and ran downstairs with the book. Taylor, come sign my cast, Peter said from the doorway of his room. Taylor snatched her bag. She would finish unpacking later. At least she was welcome somewhere. Peter's room was already messy, with spaceships hanging from the ceiling, decorated with stick-on stars and constellations, maps pinned to the wall, birds' nests, rocks, movie posters, plastic things. No antiques in here. He spread a fan of colored markers for Taylor to choose from. What's your favorite color? Red, he said. She picked different shades of red, purple, and hot pink and wrote Taylor in tall block letters up the length of his cast. She wasn't leaving much space for anyone else. That was okay. She didn't have much room in this house, but she could take all the room she wanted on Peter's cast. Hey, that's cool, he said as her name took shape. Taylor colored in the letters with the hot, vibrant shades, starting with red for the T. This was one name that would be noticed. I don't understand why I can't stay in the other room, Taylor said, shading the A with magenta. It's only for showing the public during July days. What's that? Taylor colored a cerise Y. It's a festival. People pay to see old homes on a tour. Mama's been working to get our house ready this year. She writes about it in her column Yesterday's Today, Peter explained. What's that about? Taylor worked on a dark purple L. Fixing up an old house. Cleaning up old pieces of furniture, finding out the history of old houses, going to yard sales and flea markets, that kind of stuff. Dad could have made a place for her in the attic. A place of her own, so she wouldn't have to bunk with a snobby stepsister who didn't like it. And Taylor colored the O orange and finished with a red R. Cool, Peter said again, admiring it. Thanks. Peter, do you think I could get something to eat? Miss Callahan didn't want to stop for lunch. Sure, I'm always ready to eat. In the kitchen, located under Dad and Sylvania's bedroom, was in the wing of the house with its own outside door. Taylor glanced at the living room as they went through the hall. It looked like a museum, so did the dining room, but the kitchen family room was more modern, with comfortable chairs and a sofa, a round wooden table, dark wooden cabinets. Baskets and old cooking utensils hung from the walls and ceilings, and potted plants grew in sunny spots. Antique things like copper kettles and pots and old bottles, dried flowers, wooden bowls of wooden fruit mixed with real candlesticks, and wooden roosters were tucked around and into bookcases and given the room a cluttery warmth. The stairway in the corner led up to the master bedroom. Another one led to the cellar below. A door connected the kitchen area and the dining room. They made peanut butter and banana sandwiches and took them out to the island summer house with a pitcher of lemonade and glasses. They pretended they were marooned on an island in the South Seas. Peter was fun, but when they finished eating, they were back in West Virginia with the rest of the summer waiting for them. Let's watch TV or something, she suggested. Can't, Peter shook his head. No TV. You mean you don't have one here? Yeah, we have one. We don't have cable, and we only get 2.5 stations, he said morosely. How can you get half a station? You can see it, but there's so much snow and static that you don't want to. Mom won't have a satellite dish around the house. She said it's too far out of period, whatever that means. Steve said we might get a mini satellite later on, if he can figure out a way to rig it up without ruining the period look of the house. Anyway, Mom says TV stunts our brains. Got any new computer games? Peter gave her a look of pure misery. No, just my old ones. Mom says the budget is tight right now with all the work on the house. But this is child abuse. I know. It's what Nicole told them. But they just laughed. We're supposed to play the old ones or read and explore and make up our own games. Or play board games like Monopoly or chess. With real boards and funny little things for markers and real cards. If Mom could, she would have us living in the 18th and 19th centuries. Want to play one of the games? Taylor shrugged. Okay. Peter got the Monopoly game, and they played the rest of the afternoon on the screened porch, sitting in comfortable twig chairs with fat cushions. It wasn't much fun with just the two of them, and it took Peter forever to count out money one-handed to pay off her hotels when he landed on Park Place. Dad came home at 4, bear-hugging Taylor and apologizing profusely for not being here to meet her. It was the water pump. I had to get the car towed. I told the machinist I need a rush job because my daughter was coming. They did the best they could. But now you're here for the summer, and we're all going to have a great time, he said, beaming. Maybe summer wouldn't be too bad. At least Dad was here now, and Peter was friendly, Sylvania too. Nicole was the only sour note. That and the 2.5 TV channels. Taylor was glad they were allowed to use electricity for reading. She had been worried that Sylvania would make them use candles or oil lamps.